Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to get into a problem that is often silent, but at the same time profoundly destructive. We're not talking about a loud disaster or some obvious threat. We're talking about what might be the most subtle barrier to human progress there is.
Yeah.
The quiet, pervasive fear of criticism.
Yeah.
It's this invisible force that keeps brilliant ideas hidden away and really capable people just perpetually hesitant. It turns potential into, well, private regret.
And that quiet surrender is exactly what we're dissecting today. Our mission is to analyze how this fear functions as a kind of silent prison. It prevents action before a single shot is even fired.
Right.
And for this, we're drawing on a really powerful synthesis of disciplines from engineer Reuben Juma Onunga, who studied the patterns of leaders and visionaries throughout history.
Onunga's core argument is what really stood out to me. He says that many gifted individuals, they never fail publicly.
Yeah.
They fail privately years earlier by giving up their convictions for, well, the fleeting opinions of other people.
That is the core struggle. Our whole goal in this deep dive is to extract the wisdom for achieving something much more powerful than outside validation. It's about achieving alignment over approval.
And the sources really reinforce this. The initial shock factor is that so many dreams die, not because they were impossible.
Or because they lacked funding.
Exactly. But because the owner feared how the dream would be judged or misunderstood, or even just mocked. It's an internal defeat, and it starts very, very early. Okay, so let's unpack this idea of a silent prison. Because what makes it so insidious is that it doesn't present itself as weakness, does it?
Not at all. It's clever.
It hides behind what we call respectable labels. We tell ourselves we're being wise or humble or patient.
Or just realistic.
Or realistic. When, in reality, the fear of judgment is quietly steering all of our choices. It's influencing what we attempt and, probably more importantly, what we just abandon.
It is the ultimate psychological snare. The source material brings up a biblical analogy from Proverbs. The fear of man brings a snare. And just think about what a snare does.
It's quiet.
It's quiet. It doesn't scream a warning. It traps you silently, persuasively. It convinces capable people to just delay action indefinitely.
Right. The thought process is something like, I'll start when I have more resources or when the timing is perfect.
Or when I have everyone on board. And since true perfection and universal consensus are, let's be honest, impossible for anything new.
The action just never happens.
Oh.
It's just perpetual delay, but you call it prudence.
Precisely. And that leads us to the real cost of this inaction, which is potential killed early. The central finding here is absolutely crucial. Most potential doesn't die from some spectacular failure.
No. It dies from hesitation.
It dies from hesitation. The fear is most effective right at the beginning, at the idea stage, when that idea is at its most fragile. It attacks the legitimacy of the idea before any real work has even been done.
So if you're listening to this and you feel busy, you feel productive, you're working hard, but you still feel profoundly unfulfilled, it might be because this fear redirected your life years ago. Maybe you were talked into a safer path or a socially approved career, something that offered high certainty, but, very low meaning.
And that redirection is the silent victory of the snare. You end up with a life of busy work and quiet regret instead of pursuing your deepest conviction. And what we're focused on is how to reverse that internal defeat.
Okay, so I think most people listening would agree this fear is destructive, but here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. If criticism is so bad, why do the most significant figures in history, the people we look up to, face the most intense, vicious opposition? It seems totally counterintuitive.
It does, until you realize what the dynamic really is. Every great idea, every truly world-changing initiative, it enters the world as an intruder.
An intruder.
It disrupts comfort. It questions tradition. It exposes the limits of what people already believe. And criticism becomes the easiest, quickest defense mechanism against what feels new and unfamiliar.
So in other words, when people face a disruptive idea, their first instinct isn't to analyze it. It's to defend their current reality.
Exactly. And you see this pattern repeat in every single field. Just take the historical examples from the source material. Thomas Edison. He wasn't working in secret. He was publicly ridiculed for his failures.
Right. People saw the thousands of attempts that didn't work.
And they branded him an eccentric failure. They didn't see that the mistakes were the process.
Or you shift to someone like Steve Jobs. When he insisted that technology needed simplicity, beauty, elegance in its design, he was just dismissed as unrealistic.
Yeah, critics said computers were just tools for business, for experts, and that design was just a frivolous cost.
And yet, That exact vision, the one they criticized, is what defined personal computing for the next generation. The criticism didn't invalidate the idea at all.
No, it just highlighted how far ahead of the curve it was.
Then you've got the modern parallel with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Mocked, relentlessly for electric cars and private space travel, people questioned his sanity.
They called his ideas financially reckless fantasy, but the criticism wasn't about his ability to execute. It was about the critics' inability to even imagine the execution.
And this all points to a deeper philosophical angle, doesn't it?
It really does. Plato observed that those who see beyond the cave are often attacked by the people who stay inside. So criticism is rarely evidence of an error. It's almost always evidence of difference.
And as Aristotle added, excellence invites envy.
The greater the potential impact, the stronger the initial resistance will be. It's almost like a law of physics.
I love that idea that criticism is evidence of difference.
Mm.
But how do we stop that from just becoming a way to rationalize bad ideas? How do you know when resistance confirms you're onto something versus when it's genuinely trying to help you course correct?
That is the crucial filter, and it leads right into the next phase of mastery. The source says if the criticism is about you, your character, your motive, your past, it's noise.
Okay.
But if it's about the process, a flaw in the design, a market risk you missed, it has to be heard with that soft heart we'll talk about. Criticism is often that early warning sign of significance, but the mature visionary features it for the grain of truth.
So if we accept that, then the real challenge moves from avoiding criticism to actually handling it.
Yeah.
And this brings us to what Onunga calls developing inner mastery, this constant battle between the inner voice and the outer noise.
Yes. The inner voice, it speaks softly. It's about clarity, conviction, and it tells you what you must do. The outer noise, on the other hand, is instant. It's loud, and it thrives in our modern world, right? It confuses popularity with truth.
And we see successful people actively defending their inner clarity from that noise.
Yeah.
You look at the careers of athletes like Serena Williams or Cristiano Ronaldo, they faced relentless, often very personal criticism early on. They had to learn to return to that inner voice, rely on their own discipline, and just let the results speak louder than all the commentary.
Their greatness was forged not in getting universal approval, but in that unwavering self-belief they cultivated in private. And that kind of clarity, it demands solitude.
We overlook that part.
We do. It's a practical step. If you're constantly plugged in, constantly available, you lose the insulation you need to hear your own convictions.
It's a good reminder that even figures like Jesus regularly withdrew from the crowds to reflect. If we want clarity, we have to build that discipline of insulation into our lives.
And that solitude, that's what helps you cultivate the essential skill, emotional detachment. This is where Stoic principles become really practical.
And detachment isn't indifference, right? It's not about not caring.
No, it's not denying the hurt. It's emotional mastery. It's the ability to feel the sting of criticism without being controlled by it.
Marcus Aurelius taught that opinions are just reflections of the critic's mind. They're a description of their state, not a command over your own path.
And just think about that difference. Emotionally reactive people, they spend so much energy explaining themselves, justifying their choices, trying to get retrospective approval.
Well, discipline builders just don't.
They don't. They know arguing is a distraction from the work itself.
I mean, the perfect example is Jeff Bezos. For years, Amazon was hammered for not having immediate profits.
Constantly.
Analysts wanted short-term gains, but Bezos had a decade-long vision. He didn't waste time explaining why he was right. He spent that energy building the future he saw.
And that restraint, that refusal to get into every little fight, that becomes its own kind of authority. There's a proverb, a fool vents all his feelings, but a wise person holds them back.
So silence can be a statement.
It can be a profound statement. Think about Jesus standing silent before false accusations. That wasn't weakness. It communicated a conviction that no verbal argument ever could.
But I think a lot of listeners would find that so hard to apply. In today's world, doesn't that silence just let your voice get overwritten? Is there a time when you absolutely must defend your destiny?
That's a sharp question, and the answer is about timing and focus. You defend the work, but you don't defend yourself. If silence lets misinformation derail the mission, then you provide clarity. But that clarity has to be brief, focused on the facts of the purpose, never the feelings of the critic. If you're focused on long-term impact, most of this noise, it just fades away in a few news cycles. Time is the ultimate filter.
That makes sense. Focus on the mission, not the self.
Yeah.
But okay, we have to address the inevitable deep cut. The most difficult criticism, it doesn't come from strangers online.
No.
It comes from the people closest to you. Family, peers, colleagues. They have an emotional authority that critics just don't.
And this is often the point where people give up. Chapter 8 of the source really gets into this. When criticism is familiar, it feels existential, but we need context here. It is often not malice. It is their fear projected onto you.
Their fear. How does that work?
Well, your growth threatens their sense of stability. It challenges what Onunga calls the unspoken agreements about who you're allowed to become.
Ah.
If you suddenly change direction or pursue a risky ambition or succeed beyond what they expect, it makes them uncomfortable. Your ambition implicitly questions their own safe choices, so they project that discomfort onto you as concern.
Disguised as wisdom or realism.
Exactly. The person who knows you best struggles to accept who you are becoming because they only remember who you were.
It's that old pattern, isn't it? A prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown.
Perfectly put, familiarity can blind people to potential. They want the old predictable you back because the new you is destabilizing their reality.
So how do you respond to that without burning bridges or giving up on your purpose?
The maturity required here is to respond without resentment. Bitterness poisons your purpose. It clouds your judgment and it turns your conviction into an act of spite. Wisdom means honoring the relationship, treating them with kindness and respect without obeying the fear they're projecting. You maintain your boundaries and convictions while still respecting the person.
So what's a practical line for the listener here?
The source notes that silence at times preserves peace better than argument. You don't have to constantly defend your destiny to them. You can just state your path, acknowledge their concern, I hear your worry, but I have clarity on this, and then get back to the work. You don't owe them endless justification for your future. You owe them respect.
So if we synthesize all of this, recognizing the snare, accepting opposition as a signpost, and that requirement for internal detachment, we arrive at this freedom of alignment. Onunga says that true maturity is holding two seemingly opposite qualities together.
The dual discipline.
A thick skin and a soft heart.
Exactly. You need the thick skin to endure criticism without collapsing emotionally. It stops every bruise from changing your direction. But you desperately need the soft heart to preserve your humility, your compassion, your teachability.
How do you keep the thick skin from just turning into arrogance or rigidity?
That's the tension. The soft heart is the filler. It tells you to listen for the grain of truth, even if the delivery is cruel. And it helps you remain compassionate toward the critic, recognizing their own fears. The moment you stop listening for that grain of truth, your resilience becomes arrogance, and that's when you risk making real mistakes.
The Nelson Mandela analogy from the source is just a perfect example of this balance. His thick skin let him endure decades in prison, protecting his mission.
But it was his soft heart that preserved his humanity. It's what allowed him to emerge and choose reconciliation over revenge. The thick skin protected the mission, but the soft heart defined the legacy.
Which brings us to the final freedom, right? Living free from the prison of approval. What does that life actually look like in practice?
It means that validation is no longer the fuel for your action. If you need applause to keep going, then approval is your master. The mature state is when success shifts from being defined by applause to being defined by alignment with your purpose. It's the discipline of making choices based on your highest conviction, regardless of the emotional reward you get from the outside. You move from seeking popularity to seeking faithfulness.
And the simple, maybe painful truth is that a life lived to please everyone eventually satisfies no one. You just become a reflection of your environment instead of the person who changed it.
And what we've learned today is that criticism is either useful for refinement or it's irrelevant to the mission, but it absolutely does not need to be controlling. We have to choose growth over comfort.
And purpose over applause.
And the final insight that matters most is this. The deepest danger isn't the public criticism itself. It is the danger of a life unlived. We have to replace the fear of criticism with the fear of wasted potential.
That's the one that shows up as that quiet, haunting question later in life. What if I had tried?
That's the ultimate choice. The difference between a public failure and a private surrender.
So the final question for you to mull over as you step into your day and maybe into your next great endeavor is this. Will you live to be approved or will you live to be aligned? That choice will determine your legacy.